My name's Holland Andrews. I am a composer, vocalist, performer, and I'm in Queens, New York currently.
My name is Marissa, and I create work under the name Lone King Projects. I'm a dancer, choreographer, and also filmmaker, and I'm currently in Los Angeles.
It was kind of this like uncannily seamless process. That's how I experienced it, at least, like with the questions that you were asking and even where we were coming from as two individuals who hadn't met, who were put together to work together in this piece, in this process. Operating from a similar place of like emotionality. And I remember when you were first talking about like the kind of the core of themes or like foundational themes that you work with as a performer, being from a place of emotion, I was like, yeah, we're working together and this makes like total cosmic sense.
Yeah, so we had that conversation, and I had thrown out a couple ideas during our initial conversation, and we kind of just decided to keep going that route. Um, and writing to each other. And I was also interested in being on the same page, like thinking about like having the same things on our mind. And that ended up coming in the form of questions. I know there's like there's a lot of people right now that are kind of saying like, let's just get back to where we were. But I find myself interested in like, how do we evolve? Like, how do we find ourselves in somewhere new that's maybe better than where we were.
Being in like this quarantine space, this really like kind of personal space that I felt was being shown in the imagery that I was being sent. Um, it only made sense for me to be providing something new with what I was making from home versus like something that I had recorded in the past and wasn't using. And um, so I just kind of like was piecing things together, um, from this place of like, I think that you talking about questions is also really perfect for now too, because there's just like all of this fucking year turned everybody's future into a question mark, right? Like all of the unknown, all of the uncertainty, and then just living day by day. And like what better like grammatical uh, container than like a question or a question mark? Because so much of the external has been taken away or had been taken away because of the pandemic. Something that we were really craving, or that humans really crave in general, that was removed from us, was vulnerability. And so we are kind of forced into finding ways to be vulnerable in these new digital spaces, and with ourselves on like pretty much a whole other interior level that a lot of people maybe hadn't gotten to explore yet, the sort of like inward journeying. And then also mirroring that in the digital realm, coming from like a place of creativity. So these were some things that I was working with in like the kind of more minimal, restrained um, textures that I was using in the music, and coming at it from that angle in terms of composition. Some of the things that I was thinking about in terms of questions was, speaking from a place of vulnerability, was, am I the right person to be asking for help? This was a question that that was kind of coming through my own mind in making this sonic material. And struggling with doubt, struggling with, am I good enough to be trusted? And do I meet the criteria of all these things to be deserving of anything? And obviously the answer is like, yes, we were all deserving of all the love and energy that we need to be fulfilled at all times, always, no matter what. But just in these places of like, how do we maintain vulnerability and connection with being so distant from each other? This was something that I was holding space for in making the music for this work.
I mean, I feel like it was important for it to be more than just, and here's the musician. As you can see, I think that kind of moves it, in my opinion, especially on video, a little bit into like music video territory, which I think is just a different genre. And so I was trying to just think of ways that it could feel like we were both saying something as people, and not just like, this is you saying something with music, this is me saying something with movement. So that's kind of how the 2-channel came into my mind. And I've worked with 2 channels in like some of my other films, and I'm really interested in how it brings about a relationship. And I think right now that's such a thing to be exploring, you know, during this time. How are we still in a relationship, and what does relationship look like right now? And I, being on kind of my own timeline to finish this project, I did the editing. So I have an edited piece that Holland is actually not in. And then Holland gave me the video, and I incorporated that in. And I really actually, I mean, because you were very open to, it could be in there, it could not be in there. But I think with it in there, it was, I like that it seems like a lot of different things. Like, yes, I know that you are creating music, but I don't actually think that's obvious. I think it can be interpreted in so many different ways. This person engaging with their own screen, like while we're all engaging with this screen. Yeah, so that's just like kind of how we got there, and how I like that it can mean a lot of different things.
Looking is often the quickest way to fall.
If he were not falling, he might very well be flying.
Looking is often the quickest way to fall.
I'll tell you a story.
If he were not falling,
He might very well be flying.
If you were not falling, you might very well be flying. I've lost you only to discover that I have gone missing as well. On one level, I think I have lost you only to discover that I have gone missing as well. Only to discover that
I'll tell you a story.
looking is often the way to fall. If you were not falling, you might very well be flying. Lost you only to discover that I have gone missing as well. Only to discover that I think I have lost you only to discover that falling in love is a fall. Because we expect to be kind to life. Looking to discover is falling in love. If you were falling to expect to be kind to
I think I have lost
you only to discover that I have gone missing as well.
Gone missing as well. On one level, I'll tell you a story.
if he were not falling,
Without benefit of parachutes or wings. On one level,
if he were not falling,
falling in love is a fall precisely because we expect to be caught. If she were not falling,
he might very well be flying.
my narrative falters. I'll tell a story of the way I am gripped and undone, gripped and undone, gripped and the way I am undone, somewhere along the way, by these very relations. I'll tell a story somewhere along the way. I'll tell a story. I'll choose to expose the way I am gripped and undone. My narrative falters as it must.
If you were not falling,
My narrative falters. My narrative falters. My narrative
let's face it, we're undone by each other, and if we're not, we're missing something.
Let's face it, we're undone
by these very relations. I'll tell you a story.
by each other, and if we're not, we're missing something. And if we're not, we're missing something. By each other,
I'll tell you a story, but my narrative falters.
your shoots are running.
I tell a story about the way I am gripped as it must.
Undone by each other, and if we're not,
We're undone by each other.
I think I have lost you. Only to discover
If you were not falling,
that I have gone missing as well.
let's face it, he might very well be flying.
To fall.
So I wrote everything that you hear that's played by piano is the original piece. So the original piece is maybe like 2 minutes long, sort of. It's a very small thing. And I wrote it while I was in Virginia towards the beginning of quarantine. My thinking originally was Liana will probably make an amazing video and do something amazing with gesture. Tyler will probably do a lot of amazing research and help direct where we go with the rhetoric of the piece. And Robert will be able to play this perfectly, and I'm excited to hear what he does with it. So I gave it to them, and then kind of like surrendered control from there.
You kind of just gave it to us and were like, are there movements that this inspires? Is there space that you imagine here? And Tyler, do you have words? So at the beginning of quarantine, also a lot of the research that Tyler was doing was into the way that dramaturgs responded to 9/11 in this kind of, we are trying to process a crisis, and how are we going to do that? Critical theory, of course. So a lot of the words that you hear come from sort of obsession with the fall that Tyler was researching, as well as my own personal critical theory rabbit hole was Judith Butler's writings on grief in this text called Precarious Life. So that was sort of the original, that amalgamation of ideas was the original jumping off point. And there's this sort of outlining of a thing that isn't there anymore that became representative of the animation, in that I can't see my body, but I can see the contours that it left. I can see sort of the outline of it. And that's a way to conceptualize grief. That's a way to turn a lot of the phrases, a lot of the text that we were pulling into something reified, as much as video can be reified.
So there was a full set of research done and a full draft of the video done that was to just the piano music, actually, without electronics, like no electronics yet. Which meant that, I mean, like one of the coolest things about the texture of the video is that it's so dense, right? So then what we ended up discovering was, oh, this kind of needs to be elongated in order to be self-justifiable, I think. Because it felt wrong to have something be so short, so dense. It was giving off the wrong feel. It felt a bit more aggressive than it needed to be. It's supposed to be something that kind of like envelops you and just holds you firmly, as opposed to something that's like attacking you. So I was like, okay, well then I can elongate the music personally. And so the whole middle passage that's electronics, like pretty much no piano, lots of the vocals, adding Liana's vocal parts as well. All of that happened in the second wave of edits.
And so reading all of the text and then hearing the score to the piece that was already finished, I started, like, it automatically made the wheels turn based on the things that are going on in the world. And kind of, for me, I always have created work that is with dancers, like in a space on a stage. And been in a dance company, so being a dancer in that same world, it made me think, like, how do I create something that has multiple performers? And so I kind of turned to nature. I turned to water, trees, country roads. I looked at the surroundings and I tried to start seeing how they could actually be performers on their own. And I think, having been in New York on 9/11 and being in New York for a lot of other pivotal things over the last 22 years, and then experiencing what we're experiencing now, is that idea of trauma. It actually never, it feels to me like it never really, really goes away. It does live inside of you, no matter where you change location or what space you're in, that you can always call upon those physical memories, the way things felt, the way they smelled, the way they looked, you know, and I think we bring all of that along with us.
Yeah, and that was so much of the research that went into this piece, is trying to understand what a future was going to look like after this, and the ways in which an event necessarily changes you, and you can decide to, there's sort of like two Freudian pathways. There's melancholia or mourning. The idea of melancholia is that it's so painful to let that go, to let that, the way that we used to live go, that we just attach to the ways that's reflected in ourselves. Like, I'm going to still be busy and I'm going to drink a cup of coffee every morning. Or the pathway of mourning, where you accept that the thing is lost, and there's a necessary reckoning with that trauma. And it felt like when we created the piece, there was a fork in the road, that we could choose to go either direction. And I see that the way in which you've dealt with those traumas, the way that you talk about that, is so reflective of that part of the piece.
The score, Darian, it also feels like it has a kind of healing power in this way that, when you are going through those stages of trauma, acceptance and the mourning of these things, it's like that idea of turning and looking at it, or some days you have to turn and not look at it. And the bookends, that you created with the score, they feel like those two ideas. They feel like they have very healing power. For me, movement has always been healing, and both of those scores, they really made me want to move. And so it was very interesting to feel like that that the two ends had they both felt healing, but in different ways.
Because that is actually the point of the original piece. In Place was supposed to be a space where people could just process literally everything that was happening, to provide that quiet in the moment of the trauma, so that you can heal from it already, or start whatever processes of healing you could while inside of it. So now it's good to give you a transition from reality into that space, which no longer feels maybe so immediate, whereas like a couple months ago it did, because we were just all there.
As I was watching it, what became really present was the idea that this was really the only thing for me that differentiated Now and March. That usually I can name like so many shows that I did and people that I met, and it was really wonderful to have an emblem to this time that was just one thing. It was just one simple thing that I could re-experience myself, and then also show to other people that, like, this is the length of time between where we were in March and now. And I think that realizing the simplicity of that difference was healing itself.
For me, I think that something like this was very, very, it is like this little spot on a map right now, because we have never met in person. We don't know each other. We don't know each other really at all, barely, and it kind of is like that symbol of being truly distant from the world and from meeting new people. And even when you do interact, that the mask covers a part of someone's identity. And there is that feels very present right now with getting the opportunity to collaborate with artists who I don't know.